Okay, I think we're going to kick off. Nice to see everyone here. And so welcome to the audience both here in Brussels at Town Hall Europe and to the audience watching us online. I'm not quite sure which camera to look at to signal to the people watching online, but welcome and thank you for joining us. My name's Joe Isles. I'm the design activation lead at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So I head up a team of researchers, facilitators, designers who are using design to put the circular economy into action and also trying to activate the world's designers and creative practitioners to use their skills to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. This is a side event of the World Circular Economy Forum 2024, which this year is coming to Brussels, and will mostly be taking place next week. But thank you to our strategic partner, DS Smith, for hosting us in this event today to talk about design for a circular economy. Today, we'll be hearing about best practice in circular design innovation from companies in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's network, and importantly, how policy can foster more circular design innovation. And I, for one, am really ready to learn. I was just saying to someone in the room, I spend a lot of my time speaking with designers and creative people in business, in design schools, in design firms, and I'll be honest, less time thinking about the broader policy landscape and the opportunities to accelerate the practice of circular design in industry and elsewhere. So I am ready to learn. But first, I'll offer a bit of a scene setter on design for the circular economy. What do we mean by circular design? And how is design crucial to the circular economy transition? And I'm going to accelerate myself, actually, and go straight to those principles of a circular economy, which hopefully most people broadly know by now. Eliminate, circulate, regenerate. So firstly, eliminate. We need to eliminate waste and pollution, reveal and design out the sources of waste and pollution at source. This could be waste caused by byproducts from an industrial process. It could be unsold inventory that's sat idle in a warehouse somewhere, or it could be overconsumption itself a sort of waste. A great example here is Appeal. They have looked at the problem of single-use packaging, often plastic, around food products, and created a sort of second skin, which is itself made from food waste. So a second skin that sits around food items. It's invisible, it's even edible, but it extends the lifespan, the freshness of food products on shelf for longer. So eliminating the very source of waste at the outset. Secondly, circulating products and materials. This is about keeping products and materials in use at their highest value and utility for as long as possible. A great example from Germany is Grover. They've looked at the people who buy a new phone every year, or they want to test out a new smart watch or use a drone, and they've said the future of tech is renting. Rent what you need for as long as you need. Send it back when you're not using it. So rather than your technological products sitting in the back of a drawer doing nothing, they can be in use in the hands of another user who can keep them at that high level of utility. And thirdly, regenerating nature. This is supporting and enhancing the natural systems on which we rely. We often treat natural systems like a farmer's field, almost like a mine we extract without thinking about how that ecosystem can be supported and continue to provide the things that we need into the future. A lovely example here is called BioPuff. It's from a startup called Ponder. And they create this material that in the fashion industry that would typically be filled with maybe some plastic fibers or feathers. In this example, it's filled with fibers from plants that support wetland regeneration. So designers sometimes think, regenerating nature, how could I possibly do that? That seems like too big of a task for me. Well, sometimes it might be about the material selection. Select materials that further upstream have a regenerative impact. So eliminate, circulate, regenerate. It's a huge shift for society. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely harder to do downstream. That's why we talk about design being vital for the circular economy transition. And what comes to mind for you in the room or watching online when you think about design for the circular economy? You might think about some different products that are designed in a different way, or material selection, like this example. But at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, when we thought about what design for a circular economy is at its heart, and the potential there, we thought it was about much more than that. And so we spoke with a lot of designers, mostly in a group that we convene called the Circular Design Leaders, who are chief design officers and heads of design from some partners in our network. And we boiled it down to 6 levers, 6 areas where designers and design teams can support and influence the shift to a circular economy. We called it the adaptive strategy for circular design because when speaking to people about it, we found it really flexible. It goes beyond just a few material tweaks or product tweaks, and actually offers many starting points for design teams to utilize design to support the shift to a circular economy. So first up is about understanding the system. Designers can use things like service design or many different skills to understand and appreciate how a system works. So develop views of the system that ask about the relationship with the system. And why this is important for a circular economy is doing something like mapping materials flows within a city, in a value chain, in an industry, can reveal where material or value is being lost from the system. So it can give an entry point to really discern where the biggest opportunities are to eliminate waste, to circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature. A really nice anecdotal example that I think of is from Safia Qureshi. She's the founder of a reusable packaging company called Club Zero. And her understanding of the system came when she was in London. She got on a tube, and she saw 3 guys get onto the same tube, and they all had a coffee cup, branded coffee cup, in their hand. And they'd all been to the same coffee shop. They all traveled the same distance on the tube, got off at the same stop as Safia. She went up to the street level, and she saw them all put their coffee cups in the same bin. And that gave her the awakening that there are these understandable and repeatable flows of materials, in this case around a city, and if we tap into that, we could develop infrastructure that keeps those materials in use, that develops reuse systems for, in this case, coffee cups, or takeaway food packaging, that leverages the way that system works and the way that people and stuff is moving around the city. Secondly, envisioning circular futures. So products, services, systems that are designed for a circular economy are based on different principles, eliminating, circulating, and regenerating. So they may prompt new behaviors, they may feel unfamiliar. And that means that we need to really imagine what a circular future might look like to enable people to explore and refine the concepts. Jamie Bates, one of our circular design leaders from Unilever, said that narrative creation and visualization can help motivate others to take action. So on a practical level, imagining circular futures can reveal unanswered questions, but also it can gain buy-in and help people see the role that they play in building a more circular future. It can surface new areas of collaboration or innovation opportunities. Here's a nice example from some of our work. This is called Climate Crunch. It's an imaginary cereal. We imagined the food products of 2030. This is a cereal that places the farmer as the climate hero. That in farming, regeneratively grown wheat and peas, with a strapline, every bite, you're part of a movement of consumers who are reversing climate change. So we've taken these products out into the world and people think they're real, which is kind of helpful, really. It's called speculative design, where we speculate about what the future might look like and then ask why not? Why could we not create products like this? What does it prompt for people? What opportunities does it make them think of? Next up is creating the conditions for collaboration. So the shift to a circular economy requires previously unimagined connections of people, of institutions, industries, resources, and information, and cooperation will be required to achieve meaningful scale and impact. And when it comes to circular design, bringing those actors together is really crucial. The example that Martin Pauli, a friend of ours from Arup, gave was of the New European Bauhaus effort, which has brought together scores of institutions and people and thinkers to envisage and collaborate around a sort of design and industrial renaissance. So really, this is about the knowledge, but also the space, the environment for people to collaborate, and giving and designers, again, well-versed in facilitating that. Here are three examples of the conditions for collaboration, three archetypes, if you will. There are probably many more, but there's our own circular jeans redesign project, in which we brought together initially around 40 stakeholders in the denim jeans value chain to agree the baseline guidelines for circular jeans. What would jeans, an iconic product, look like in a circular economy? And they've gone on to produce millions of pairs of jeans, each under their own brands, according to those guidelines. So a beacon project is one archetype. Another is redesigning the system. Repack almost act as a broker. They're a startup that broker a new type of innovation around reusable packaging. And then redesign the system using the existing actors. So existing actors coming together and saying, hey, let's create a new innovation, a new collaboration together. The Swedish return system which has been going for about 25 years now, of food products coming to retailers through reusable packaging, is a great example of that. There are probably many more examples of collaboration archetypes, but designers are really good at spotting those and facilitating them. To go along with that, we need to build out circular design capabilities. We've got a quote here from Alan Potts, who, again, a member of the Circular Design Leaders, previously Design Innovation Director at DS Smith, who spoke about, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about it today, about building cross-functional teams of designers and non-designers to design systems rather than products. And I think the interesting thing when working with DS Smith on this was the effort to upskill around 600 plus designers, so that it wasn't just one or two people who knew about designing for the circular economy, but there was almost a sense of contagion around the organization, that many people had the skills and awareness to design according to these new principles. So it's about widespread understanding of circular economy within an organization. Next up is rewriting the rules. Designers are always responding to rules. Some of them might just call them a design brief. They're the constraints that designers are used to responding to design, and we've done that in the linear economy, and we can do that in the circular economy as well. Ultimately, I think the key thing here is that we can accelerate change if we make it easier for designers to incorporate the principles of a circular economy into what they do, and rules can be really critical to that. They might be guidelines at product level, technical guidelines that specify certain ingredients or materials that should or shouldn't be included in a product. It might be about some broader principles at an organizational level, and the DS Smith circular design principles are an excellent example of that. Or zooming out further, it might be about policies at industry level and beyond. The example of the French repairability index is a nice example of that. So many designers find themselves responding to policy directives, but others, maybe some in the room or watching online, have the opportunity to influence policy itself. We're seeing that more and more, whether that's through business consortia, co-creation with the public sector, or increasingly through direct involvement with policy design. So we know that these can align incentives and can create shared language or common efforts across industries. So the rules of the game are critical for designers as well. And then lastly, tools. Again, this is something that designers are well versed in. We keep hearing this, that designers use workshops, they use methods or approaches, different types of software to to create products for the linear economy, they have the chance to harness those, and they might need to adapt them to design for a circular economy, to test a product, to test a new service out, to think about how a product might work in a hypothetical circular scenario and assess its impact. Metrics are a tool as well, that they help us evaluate the impact that we're having through new innovations. So a couple of examples here. Project Positive from Biomimicry 3.8, which is a tool that effectively asks designers to compare their proposal for a building or a built environment project alongside the ecosystem services that the natural environment would provide. So using nature as a benchmark and deriving a plan and metrics from that comparison. And then the Arup Circular Buildings Toolkit, which we created alongside Arup, that brings together the industry and circular economy expertise to create practical strategies and measures for architects. So these are examples of new tools that can support designers and creatives in their efforts to design for a more circular economy. So we put those together and summarize that as the adaptive strategy for circular design, these 6 areas: understand the system, envision circular futures, create the conditions for collaboration, build circular design capabilities, develop tools for designers to design, and rewrite the rules so it makes it easier for designers to build those principles into what they do. But that's the theory. We think it's derived, hopefully, from conversation and real experience from people working in this area and what they've found is working and what's not. But it is based on a type of design practice that we at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, hopefully, others would like to see. But what we need as well is a continued check on how that's panning out in practice. So on that note, I'd like to introduce the Circular Design Showcase portion of the session today. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation works with many businesses, around 200 organizations, from strategic partners and members, to foster collaboration, both within their organization and between them, to help them put the circular economy into practice. And in this next session, we're going to hear from 4 companies in our network who are integrating circular design into their what they do, into their work. So we're going to hear from Harold Tepper from Philips, Chris Else from DS Smith, Fabien Watley from JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, and Sophia Chrysopoulou from Coca-Cola. And Harold, I think you're stepping up to us first. Do you have slides?
Yes.
There you go then. I'll give you the power.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Joe, for this excellent introduction and very recognizable. So I hope to shed some light on how we have implemented some of these practices within Philips. Maybe first on the context on what is Philips. So as most of you probably know, we have made a massive transition over the last decade, I would say, to become what we call a focused health technology company. So really focusing with our products and services on the health and well-being of people. That has created a lot of focus for ourselves and for our company, and still we have a very broad portfolio that's also, in this context, I think, good to realize. It ranges from selling large-scale medical equipment to hospitals, all the way down to selling toothbrushes and other health and well-being products to the home. Which is a challenge also then for circular design. What does circular design mean for these different business units? But let me start with why. Why would sustainability be important for us and circular economy in particular? Now, if you look at the healthcare sector, and you can say this is devastating, or you can say it's an opportunity. But healthcare as a sector is one of the most polluting sectors that is out there. And it's not often realized like that. So responsible for 4.5% of global CO2 emissions. And that's actually growing. So if you look at countries like the Netherlands or the US or the UK, this is more close to 6 or 7%. So you can imagine that if the global wealth continues to increase, as I hope it will do, then this number is really under further pressure. But also a lot of raw materials use and a huge impact on the waste that is created. And that's, of course, where circular economy can play a big role in bending the curve on the material transition. And if you look from the, let's say, viewpoint of a hospital, then the biggest impact is coming from the scope 3 of the hospital. So that's us. That's the supply chain. So it's not the energy use of the hospital, but it's really the materials, products, and services that they buy in from us. So that is what puts our circular economy program and eco-design square on the map. Why is it an important topic for us in our ESG strategy? If you then take the look from Philips, you see that if we look at our global footprint, scope 1, 2, and 3, that 90% of that footprint is related to our products. So the biggest sphere that you see here is actually the energy use of our products. Everything we sell has a power plug and usually lasts for 10 or even multiples of 10 years in the market. So the energy use is a big component. But the second biggest one is around materials and so the products that we put on the market. And they have packaging and product disposal, waste, etc. So all in all, almost the whole footprint is related to the products that we produce and that we put on the market. So that's why you see in our, let's say, strategic pillars of eco-design, these 4 elements. So energy on top, energy efficiency to address that largest ball. But then more recently, over the last 3 years, we have spent a lot of time internally, but also with other companies and with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to think about how can we create a handle also for circular design in our eco-design framework. So what does it mean for our circular economy objectives? I won't mention all of them, but there's quite some ambitious goals on circular economy. We want to reach 25% of our revenue from products and services that contribute to circularity. That can be about refurbishment, recycled content, upgrades, take back of materials. I spent an hour on how we calculate that, but I won't do that today. But a big part of that revenue generation is also from design, from the circular design of our products. And that's why we have said we want to reach 100% of our NPIs, new product introductions, to be eco-designed. So what that means is that where we have already decades-long experience with eco-design, we have currently 70% of our revenue is related to green products, if you will. But still, it's a best effort kind of thing. And now we say, no, it needs to be 100%. So that really states also internally, sustainable design is to become the norm. And then we focus, we can of course not change the products that are already on the market. So that's why we focus on the innovation pipeline. So what we say that every designer, product engineer that's working on a new innovation, working on a change of a product or a change of a service, has to go through this eco-design process and has to take account of these 4 different elements of eco-design. Now, that's all nice, but then you have to also specify what it means. And that's not an easy thing, and it's also not a one-time thing. So I show here a couple of the key elements of our eco-design framework. If I do the same presentation in 5 years, it might look different again. And that's also what we have learned of 40 years of eco-design, right? So sustainability is changing. So underlying this process, we can continuously update the requirements that our products need to adhere to. And those requirements are then given by external regulations or internal commitments and internal ambitions. So if you look at energy, for instance, it's around low power modes, standby modes, etc. But of course, today is on circularity. That's really around design with minimal materials, design for recycling, design for refurbishment, design for disassembly and assembly, and design with sustainable materials. Those are sort of the 3 buckets that we are looking at. And of course, like I said, we have quite a broad product portfolio. So what is circular design for an MR scanner is totally different than circular design for a toothbrush, for instance. So how we try to tackle that is via circular design strategy. So, and this has also been presented last year at one of the large Ellen MacArthur workshops. So really discussed that with a lot of other companies on how they are doing that, and still very much in development, thinking about, okay, how does this work? We have now high-level requirements and tools and trainings for all these different strategies. But of course, now it's really starting, because now the designers are working with it, and we will get a lot of feedback on what works and what doesn't work. And it's not to say that every single product needs to adhere to all of these 9 strategies, because I think what was an insight for me is that there's no such thing as a circular product, right? The circularity comes from the sort of the design aspects of the products combined with how you put the product in the market. So that was also an insight for what that means for the process, because it basically means that earlier on in the innovation process, you need to put the designers and the product engineers together with the market developers and the business developers. Because if you don't know how do you put your product in the market, then it's difficult to triage and to get to a decision what are the right strategies. So we have a sort of a decision tree around this. And now to give then to the 2 extreme examples, if you look at the large-scale medical equipment, then it's a lot around design for refurbishment, design for disassembly, modular design, etc. Because there's a lot of value in that, and we do actually take back as much of those large-scale equipment as possible from our customers, and then we refurbish them. But if you look at a consumer product, then oftentimes we don't see it back because the market is not ready for it, or it's too small, or it goes into country and national collection schemes. So there we work more, beginning of pipe basically, at the front end to say, can we introduce more recycled content in our products? So that's a different design strategy based on the different market conditions and the different aspects of the products. But the overarching principles are always around use less, use longer, and use again. Those are sort of the slogans, the words that we found resonate very much inside our company. So they help a lot. Now then, I want to close off with giving some examples on what that then means in practice. So I brought three examples here. This is one of our newest MR scanners. It's called Blue Seal because it's completely sealed. And what do we mean with this? So, of course, this MR scanner is so big because there's a large magnet in there. That magnet needs to be super cooled, and that's typically done with helium. Regular MR scanners use 1,500 liters of helium in this magnet, from us and from our competitors. And sometimes there are even moments when this helium is leaking, and it's leaking out of the system, so then it has to be replenished. And helium is one of those gases, I didn't know that myself earlier, that actually will leave the atmosphere, will leave the planet if it leaks out. So that's exactly the opposite of circularity. So what we have been able to do now with this new sealed MR scanner is that it's completely locked, and the helium doesn't disappear anymore. And moreover, we can do with 7 liters of helium instead of 1,500 liters. So that's a huge impact. We have been able to avoid the use of millions of liters of helium since the introduction of this machine. It's a huge impact on the environmental footprint, but of course also on the cost of our customers. So this is one of the examples where environmental benefit and economic benefit go hand in hand, which is always nice if you can find that sweet spot, of course. Now this is also a recent introduction of our bio-based brush heads. So we have actually built up quite some experience over the last years in introducing recycled plastics in our consumer products. But if you talk about health-related products, then you can often not use that, or you cannot use recycled plastics in any components that will touch the body. So that's why we now also need to sort of reinvent that and see what that means. And that's why we are looking more and more at bio-based materials, and of course then sustainably sourced bio-based materials. And this is one of the first examples where we were able to do that. And last but not least, of course, also packaging will strong ambitions to to get to plastic-free packaging, to get to more recyclable packaging, and to get to more simple packaging also. So that's an example that you see here, which is really quite a landmark achievement, I think, that we did also over the last couple of years. So let me stop there. Hope that gave some insight, open for questions later on at the end of the session, of course. Looking forward also to the other discussions. Don't know who I hand it over to. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And hello, I'm Chris Els, Head of Design at Dear Smith. Let's hope this works. There we go. We're already circular. Great. We take recovered fiber, we turn it into paper, we turn that paper into corrugated, the corrugated gets converted into packaging, and we recover that packaging into recovered fiber. All good. And only 15% of our main feedstocks are from virgin fiber, so that's all good, isn't it? Well, it's not quite the same, because at Dear Smith we have a responsibility to the circular economy to go beyond this. And we added Circular Ready to our customer promise to redefine growth in a more circular way, and this was our ambition. We defined the circular design principles, you saw them earlier on Joe's slide, and in many ways we were reformatting the way that designers think, and certainly in our area. Some of those fundamentals of the design process had to be re-examined and re-looked at. We actually trained in, yes, 700. There was this 700 figure, but it's actually 833 people right now that are working in circular design principles every day. And we produce up to 25,000 drawings every month. Every month we're creating that, which is in excess of anything between 5,000 and 6,000 projects which are delivered to customers, all with circular design metrics around them. So those principles are really important to get in, and we trained in all of those people, and we continue to do so for our entire design community. So actually it's quite straightforward in terms of how it links with what we do as packaging designers. That we protect brands and products. Well, we've always done that. That's what we do. But looking at it in the circularity perspective of what the impact of not protecting those products is, that's sort of a different way of looking at it. Optimizing materials and structure, of course, we know about that we've always been very conscious of the amount of materials we're using and how we manufacture them and so on, working through scale. Maintaining and recovering, keeping things in use as long as possible. We already have high recycling rates, so these things already chime in. But it's creating principles that are more connected with the circularity nature of things. Exploiting efficiencies in supply chains, of course, a massive part of what we do. And being able to challenge and support looking at different ways of doing things, massively important. So those were our principles. So the next thing we needed was a way to measure and monitor what we were doing, because having had the principles rolled out and really trained in, we had hard-coded that into our designers, and now it was time to hardwire that into our systems. And that's when we started this process of developing the metrics themselves. So as we heard earlier, 80% of environmental impact is done at the design stage. We know this, so it was important to bring these in at the design stage. It makes perfect sense. And it's not just about recycling anymore, as we said. We can align with this key criteria of the circular economy by applying the circular metrics. So the principles are one thing, but the metrics are a way to measure what we do, and that's what's important. Each one has got its own story, and it's great to see the engagement that we have from our customers, and also superb to see the engagement we have from our design community, because they have to work together. So we look at everything from the recyclable nature, from the material utilization, renewable source, and all the other metrics that we have in place here. And the first question was, can this actually be done? Can we do this when we're handling so many designs through our systems every day? And the answer is yes, we can, with quite a high level of automation. Because actually, if we start to link what we're doing in the design space directly with our design materials, so in the CAD itself, then we can start to automate as much of this as possible. This is also linking to our now next ambitions. And the wheel helps us to identify and target the priorities to drive the change that we want. This is the purpose. And I often get asked, what's the most important one? What should we be focusing on? And the point is that they're all honest and transparent, and they will conflict with one another. They will change depending on what the application is. If it's an automotive industrial pack or a fast-moving consumer good, you're likely to see differences in the way the metrics come out. So this is, there's no right or wrong answer. But the point is that the designers must consider all aspects of it. So yes, there's a degree of automation when we connect it to our systems, but we are there to challenge the status quo. This is the point. We allow them to challenge what the customer design criteria is and look at those design choices that we make through the lens of the circular economy. And that's the big difference. And we've been doing that since September 2021. And today, we've got 72,000 circular design metrics out there attached to items, which is a fantastic achievement from the business. And of course, what do we get when we make that? We get lots of data. We get lots of really, really good data. And we create a lot of it from all those metrics. And we work with customers on new and legacy items. This also gives us a way to look backwards as well and look at items. And because circular design is fundamental to everything that we do inside our systems, we can then start to bring that into the customer environment, which is really, really important. When we have all this data, we can look at this bit as well, the whole predictive modeling, the way that we can embrace AI of the future, how we can tap into that with our digitalization agenda. It gives us a massive amount of information that we can hold very dear to make ourselves so much more efficient and effective in our design space. We're not talking about robot designers, but we're talking about being able to use the power of data to make those processes so much more efficient. And we can do it at any stage. This is what's so good about this, now that we've had time for this to embed. It's embedded in our systems. So from concept, even concept work that we do in the innovation space, we can call up the principles of applying a circular design metric and start looking at any of the metrics around the wheel. We've got dashboards, we've got the infographic that we put on all our materials, we're putting it on prototype labels, we're putting it on our documentation, so there's an awareness of it. We can make comparisons from one to another. And when we're doing that, it's incumbent on the designer to really examine what we're replacing. So if we've got box A and we want to do box B, then there's a requirement there for them to look at it, examine it, and then make a comparison, so customers can use that in their decision making. And the great feedback that we've had from our customers and the great traction that we've had in application of it, it really helps boost the process, because the designers are seeing that it is actually making a difference with our customers. So now it's way of life. The challenge is now to bring this into the light some more. For a lot of our customers, it's a very new thing, and we always wanted to ensure that we were bringing customers along on our journey. So some have embraced it wholly, some still need a bit of work, but that's our job in design, to bring it through. And because we can apply it to every single item we produce, it's there. Whether it's being used or not, it's there. And we have it in our systems. So our challenge now in the future is to improve. It's not over yet. I'm sure that when we look at the metrics wheel, that some of them are either going to have to change or be adapted or move in a different space. So it's something we're acutely aware of. It was always designed to provoke and promote a conversation. People will ask, what shall I do with this, Chris? I've got conflicting metrics. Yesterday it looked okay, now it's not. Well, that's actually a good thing. This is what we're trying to do. We want to provoke that conversation so that customers are now asking questions. Why am I not 100%? I want everything green. Well, it can't always be green. So the idea is to bring our customers along and to try to embrace the circular economy together. Thank you.
We're going for Fabian next. Ah.
Thank you. Good morning. So my name is Fabian Watlett. I work at JLR, formerly known as Jaguar Land Rover, and I work in the sustainability office. And today I'm going to talk to you about our sustainability strategy, but watch out for the circularity element. Obviously, it's core to our sustainability strategy. So let's start with who we are owned by. So we are part of Tata Group. Tata Group is a massive, massive group globally. And our chairman has the ambition to make the Tata companies the most sustainable companies in the world. No pressure. And it's definitely something which is at the core of business. It's one of the 5 key metrics that Tata Group is watching. So we have, as a company, to deliver on this ambition. So we've got our own sustainability strategy established, which is based on 3 pillars. So the first one is Planet Regenerate and focuses on carbon emissions, on circular economy, and on biodiversity. And now I'm going to talk about these elements today. We've got 2 other pillars, so Engage for Good, which is more about our communities or the communities we operate in, and the environments we are facing in our supply chains, for example. And then responsible business is more about governance, it's more about reporting. But yeah, so as I said, I'm going to focus more on Planet Regenerate, on our carbon emissions, on biodiversity, and obviously on circular economy, but I've left that for the last piece. So let's first talk about carbon emissions. I'm not going to dive into the figures here. What I want to flag here is that basically our ambition by 2039 is to become carbon net zero. Net zero. It's really, really important to understand that. It's really ambitious. There aren't too many stakeholders within the automotive industry committing to net zero, and probably not by 2039. So we need to find a way to actually reduce our carbon emissions, and very similarly to what we've seen with the presentation from Harold at Philips, we've got the same challenges. We have exactly the same challenges within the same scopes, so we are working really hard to have an impact on that. So one way of committing ourselves to do that is to commit to the Science-Based Targets Initiative by 2030. So we've got our targets by 2030 already lined up, and we are transitioning to electrification as well to deliver on our net zero ambition. So in terms of biodiversity, this is very much in development, but let's think about why biodiversity is important for a car manufacturer. So let's take rubber, for example. Rubber is harvested in the Far East. It can lead to many different issues, including deforestation. So actually, that has an impact on the local biodiversity. So we need to be aware of where we are sourcing our rubber from. But also, when you think about iron or aluminium, that has an impact as well, because we need to extract that from the ground. So that has an impact on the local environment. So we need to take that into account. You could argue the same for leather, for example. This can lead to deforestation. This can have an impact on the habitats. It's also an important element from a well-being perspective, so certainly at our side, for our employees. And think about it, nature has the possibility to absorb a lot of carbon, again, delivering on our carbon net zero ambition. So we are working with some partners to help us on doing this as well. Now let's talk about circularity, obviously, and everything is linked to circularity, as you can see, because the biodiversity element obviously has an element of regeneration, restoration as well, and that's linked to circularity as well. But purely from a technical side, I guess we're more in the technological sphere than the biological sphere in terms of the materials we use. So why is this important for a company like JLR? Well, there are actually 6 different elements. It's obviously a great decarbonization lever. I've just talked about it. The more we become circular, the more likely it is we are going to reduce our carbon impact. We know there's a whole lot of legislation coming towards us. We need to anticipate. We need to make sure that we are at the right point in our strategy to be able to deliver and to be at least compliant. It's also something our investors are asking more and more about. So it's not just about being compliant, it's also about the fact that the investing community is asking more and more questions about elements related to circularity. So we need to be able to respond to these questions. Also, our customers, they're starting to very much understand what it means. They're asking about sustainable materials, recycled materials, or recycling, actually. And they want more and more flexibility, especially the younger generation, more flexibility in the ownership model, in the usage of the vehicle. So this has all the potential to deliver on circular business models, where the vehicles, the products, are owned differently. Another element is what happens at end of life. Well, basically, at the moment, our vehicles are put on a market, and then after 15 or 20 years, well, they're being recycled. Certainly in Europe, they're being recycled, but we don't know where or by who. And actually, that's a huge amount of value, that's a huge amount of materials that are just flowing out there, which is escaping a company like JLR. So what can we do to capture that value? And then finally, that value is probably linked to the materials. How can we anticipate supply chain risk and become more resilient by controlling more of these materials, more of these values? So the good news is that there is a regulation, there is a directive already in place, which is called the End-of-Life Vehicle Directive, and it's actually being reviewed at the moment, and it will become a regulation. And it's touching on circular design. So it's already forcing car manufacturers to think differently, but this regulation will go one step further. It will require more dismantling. It will make sure that recycling is more efficient. It will require us to use more recycled content, which is fine. It's actually forcing us in the right direction. It's forcing the whole value chain to capture the valuable assets before they are leaked out or exported, or even exported illegally. It's forcing the whole value chain about thinking how we can treat these vehicles at end of life much better, in a much better way. How can we extract that value again? How can we make sure it's actually recirculated? It's forcing us to talk to each other, simply to collaborate, to talk to the recyclers, to talk to the collectors, to talk to what we call the authorized treatment facilities. And it's covering more and more vehicles. It used to cover only cars. Now it's likely to cover other categories as well. So our response to that, and it's just a preliminary response, we're still working on it, but our main ambition really is to decouple value creation from resource use. That means basically that we are using 3 mission statements to respond to that overarching ambition, which is 1, circular resources. So from a material, from a resource perspective, what can we do? So obviously we can act a bit more responsibly, certainly, to use these materials more responsibly, to use more sustainable resources, which could be from recycled sources, for example, but also to maximize reuse. So you could argue we're already doing that with repair, but actually we could do so much more. And replenishment is more related to water, and I'll touch on that afterward. Circular products and services, that's the other element, is how do we extend the life of our products mainly. So how do we extend product utility and longevity, and how do we provide the same experience to our customers, the same modern luxury experience that we want to provide with our new vehicles? And underpinning that are the circular enablers. And I talked about Tata Group beforehand, and it's really important that one of the enablers is actually our mother company, because they're so big. they've got so many different types of businesses, they can actually help us achieve some of our ambitions. But we're also working with the rest of our supply chains, and there might even be some suppliers in the room, but we've got thousands of suppliers, and we need to work jointly to be able to realize this ambition. So I don't have the clear targets yet. It's work in progress, but we're working on materials, as I said, more recycled content. We're working on reducing waste, and hopefully towards as little as possible. We're working on water, reducing water usage in our manufacturing. And then longer term, we're working on products and services. How do we extend the life of these products? How do we offer a different way of using our products? And then the enablers are, again, all the supporting elements around it. So 3 key examples, which are obviously from the past and have been published, but I just wanted to show what we can realize when we talk to our supply chain, when we collaborate. First one at the bottom is about aluminium. We are an aluminium-intensive company, and a few years ago, we've managed to recycle offcuts from our stamp shops directly to our suppliers. And that had obviously the positive effect of reducing the carbon emissions, but also making sure that the resources are used more intensively and that we did not just discarded. And then there is a research project that we've launched to try to understand how we could do that with ELV parts, with end-of-life vehicle parts. So that's the next level ambition, is to make sure that we can actually capture this value which is escaping us, but also understand how we can track that, because we're probably already doing it. It's just that we're not really measuring accurately. Second thing is batteries. Obviously, we're moving towards electrification. I think lots of people are concerned about their batteries and so on. But batteries have a lot of life in them. They're actually exceeding our expectations in terms of reliability. So much so that even our engineering batteries are being repurposed into stationary systems, because it's just nonsense scrapping them and recycling them. They can be useful in other applications. And then finally, we're using Formula E in this case, so competition, to understand how we could do that in a competitive environment. So for example, jointly with Castrol, our Formula E team managed to refine and recycle transmission oil at the Monaco Grand Prix in 2023. So there are lots of possibilities. We're working on lots of elements. And I'm sure I can talk more about it in future events. But now I need to stop. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sofia Chrysopoulou. I'm head of EU affairs for the Coca-Cola company, working on sustainability and public policy. And I'm very happy to be here with you today, because you're all a group online and offline of committed professionals to make a circular economy, a low-emissions circular economy, a reality. And we are here today talking about circular design, and I'm learning a lot from the design experts here in the room. But one of the main reasons we are doing that, and that circular design is an imperative, is because of climate. And climate is and should be the compass. We all know that climate change is the defining challenge of our times, and we need to play a role to help addressing it and contributing to solutions. At Coca-Cola, together with our main bottling partners in Europe, this is Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific Partners and Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company, we have together committed to achieving net greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 and having a reduction of 30% by 2030 versus 2015. Now, we can talk about circular design in many, as colleagues spoke before, in many fields, right? On water, on how we use our resources. When it comes to packaging, that I would like to talk to you more about today, this accounts to 40% of our emissions. of our carbon footprint actually in Europe. And it plays a role when we want to have the net zero greenhouse gas reduction in our European value chain, right, by 2040. Therefore, we need to accelerate the circular design of beverage packaging and bring this circularity in. The world has a packaging waste problem, and therefore we have a responsibility to help solve it. I would like to take you through our World Without Waste global packaging strategy first, for the example to afterwards of the case that I was asked to present makes more sense and is well connected. So in 2018, we came forward with our global strategy called World Without Waste, aiming to collect every bottle and can that we sell, so 100% collection by 2030 globally, having all our packaging recyclable by 2025, and incorporating 50% recycled content by 2030. Here in Europe, we are accelerating our efforts. As you may have seen already in several countries, we have PET bottles made of 100% recycled PET, and we are aiming eventually to be able by 2030 to eliminate oil-based virgin PET from our bottles when the conditions are right and that we can do it. But of course, that's not only it. Further in 2020, we came forward with a goal to reduce the virgin plastic we use in our packaging, and recently came forward with a reuse target, meaning 25% of our beverage volume served either in returnable, reusable bottles or in dispensed fountain solutions using reusable vessels. And we're doing this because it helps minimizing waste, it helps reducing carbon emissions, and of course it's not the end of the story, right? Because you can talk about collection, recycling, but you also need to wonder, is the packaging necessary? How can I avoid using packaging in the first place? And when I do use packaging, can I reuse it? And at the same time, prioritizing consumer choice and convenience, because it has to work as well. While rethinking how we can serve the beverages to the consumer, you basically need to rethink the whole way of doing that, and creating a circular economy for all the packages we use, respective of the material. And of course, we have been working on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation framework of reuse, which you may be already very familiar with, and providing different solutions and rethinking how we can do that. For example, providing solutions at home, experimenting with syrups at home, or creating completely innovative collection schemes in order to have refillable bottles come back from home, or actually making more compact our freestyle machines, which you may have seen already, but making them more compact to work in the workplaces, in universities. For example, we are already doing that here in Belgium, small retailers, on the go, etc., and other opportunities. So when the organizers asked me to present an innovation, to present a case, I was trying to think what of all the innovations we have here developed in Brussels in the R&D center, and one of the biggest in the world, could work for today. And then I thought along the lines of what Joe said earlier today around the systems. So how can we see again and observe again the system? And as a Coca-Cola employee and a Greek, I could not think of a better example than the Olympic Games. So who would start, if I have got it correctly, in 107 days. And the challenge that I was asked to describe is the sheer size of this event. We're talking about 15,000 athletes, 45,000 volunteers, coming from 206 nations, all with their different habits and ways to behave as a consumer. Then we have 46 different sites, 13 million spectators, not the remote viewers, the spectators in Paris. And you can imagine how many millions of drinks servings this means and the challenge for us. And all that in 30 days. It has to work and be installed and be operational in 30 days. So Olympics and Paralympic Games are a very important opportunity for the Coca-Cola company to rethink a historic distribution model and help with the objective also of the Olympics to reduce the emissions and the plastic packaging used. So we want fans and athletes to experience a more sustainable and inclusive Olympic Games, and this will be a first of its kind circular distribution model to the world's biggest sporting event. And how are we going to do that? I'm not going to go in detail on everything, so I will try to walk you through the 3-4 main concepts here. We are going to provide athletes and fans with beverage packaging options that help them minimize the waste and reduce their emissions. This will happen through dispensed solutions, fountains, with refill options, with reusable, returnable glass bottles, with reusable cups that will have a deposit on and with bottles made of 100% recycled PET. We will, of course, help collect all the bottles and all the cups that will be used at the Games. There will be, in several occasions, in several venues across the Olympic Games venues, the opportunity to have your drink from a dispensed solution in a refillable cup with a refillable cup, as I told you, with a deposit, or with a returnable glass bottle. But when these two are not feasible because they're not practical in the setup of the Games, there will be bottles made of 100% recycled PET. We have worked together with the city of Paris to help the infrastructure with the infrastructure in landmark venues in Paris, and athletes and fans will be able to bring their reusable bottle themselves to refill it in hydration fountain stations in selected places across Paris. We're also working on how to transport that. So we're using trucks that bring the emissions down, powered by either they're electric or with biogas or with blue hydrogen to reduce our emissions and transport the products on all competition venues in Paris. And what happens after 30 days, right? All this equipment, all the branded fountains will have to be collected, of course, and we want to be able to use them again in other regional or local events. And we're also discussing with our customers and with our partners to increase the opportunity to use them, because this also comes with a consumer behavioral change that we want to bring. What I really like is this race for circularity, actually, and the ambition of the team, working together with Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific partners, is that the bottle from the Olympics opening comes back for the Paralympics opening ceremony. And this is something that usually takes 3 to 4 months, from the PET collection to recycling, to going back to the plant, filling the bottle and shipping it back to the consumer. And we'll try to do that in 4 weeks. So if I have to use this sports term, it's a race for a good cause for circularity. I can talk about it more, but I'm really looking forward to the Olympic Games, as you can imagine, for many reasons this time. But I would like also to stop here explaining the case and bridge a bit to the panel that colleagues have afterwards and bring forward some policy recommendations because policy plays a role in innovation now, and we have had a discussion already this morning. So as we are innovating for the future, we are asking policymakers to legislate for the future as well and create the enabling conditions for innovation to scale. We're working and we're supporting to have well-designed return schemes, deposit return schemes, access to feedstock for recycling for the reasons that I already explained, ability to define the right packaging mix for each market to reduce our emissions. And at the same time, also through the Olympics, but beyond that too, because not every size fits all, people have different habits, in different geographies, things work differently. We're going to learn a lot about the consumer acceptance, because the consumers do not want to compromise on convenience. They don't want to compromise on price, on taste, and on quality. So we have to make all this work and learn, because the consumer habit is not yet established. And finally, if I may, I know it's a world discussion, global discussion on circularity, if I may, a European message. The internal market in the European Union really helps to scale innovation. And we all know that it is better to do one right thing 27 times rather than 27 different right things. Also from a design perspective, I think that makes more sense. So I think we have the potential and we can create the right conditions for innovation and circular design to scale. Thank you very much, and I pass the floor to the colleagues, to John, for the next slide.
Great, thanks. Excellent. Thank you to all the speakers in the showcase portion. I wish I could say I had planned that as well as I had, setting up with the theory and having the evidence. It was better than I could have even imagined, because we did hear some excellent examples of guidelines, companies setting guidelines for their designers, new rules and tools that are being used, metrics, things like that, capability building and learning programs within organizations, understanding systems. There was a little hint at understanding the systems for take-back of products, creating a space or the language to collaborate throughout a value chain. There was a sort of predictive modeling piece, which is also a way to sort of imagine or predict what future designs. And then the Paris example as an example of also sort of speculating, imagining how might our product, our circular offering, work in that context with those constraints. And then that being also a sort of a petri dish and a place to experiment and test out some radically different ways of accessing and delivering the value that an organization is providing. So thank you to all the showcase speakers for providing some evidence for the theory at the top of the session. I should say as well, I don't think all these things are exclusive to designers or design. You might be thinking, well, is that really design? I don't think it's really exclusive to people that have gone to design school. But what I would advocate for is that designers and the methods and approaches that they celebrate can really help. So my call for folks in the room is to tap into your design teams, your innovation teams, who might be able to accelerate and give an extra level of sort of robustness to some of these innovation processes. So we've looked at what the industry is doing to support circular design. And in the next session, we're going to look at the role that legislation can play and what policies could or should be put in place to support circular design. And joining us, we've got a hybrid setup now. It's Paolo Migliorini, who's joining us virtually. Is in the ether, Deputy Head of Unit in the Directorate General for Environment in the European Commission. Paola's got extensive experience working in circular economy issues for the European Commission, working on both the first and second circular economy action plans. Aline Boone, my colleague at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Senior Policy Manager in our Brussels office. Sophia Kriegsmann, EU Public Affairs Director for Essity, the health and hygiene company. And Stephanie Brochard, Senior Manager for EU External Affairs from Unilever. And as the chairs slide into shot there, I'll invite our panelists to join us up here on the stage. Okay, great. Do I get a seat as well? Fantastic. I thought I was going to be roaming. Brilliant. So maybe by way of sort of transition between the business focus session and this one, we'll start with Sophia and Stephanie. Sophia, maybe picking up with you, can you reflect on how your company, so Essity, is working to increase circularity and adopt some of those circular design practices that we've started to talk about so far?
Thanks a lot. And just first a few words. So Essity, we're a global hygiene and health company. Our products and services are used by more than 1 billion people every day globally, and we have sales in 150 countries. And our products are then used during all stages of lives, diapers, and we have menstrual products, we have incontinence products, we have medical products, wound care and compression, toilet paper, and paper hand towels. Just sorry for that.
That's all right.
So, as many of the companies we heard before are, our work is really guided by our targets, and of course the Ellen MacArthur Foundation target is key, but also I want to tap into what Sophia mentioned about the science-based target, and of course the climate crisis we have. That is also really key for, the way we design, and circularity will really affect our emissions, and especially when it comes to scope 3 then, and this was also, of course, confirmed and discussed at COP28 stock-taking exercise that took place last year. So really to think about circularity as a way, of course, also to reduce your emissions, that's key. So how do we work with the design principles? I think, collaboration is really key. So we collaborate with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Also, for example, the Recyclass has guidelines that we use. And for each our packaging, we have a recycling assessment, and of course the criteria also varies depending on the products, and this was also underlined by previous speakers. We also work with, for example, Consumer Goods Forum, where they have golden design rules, which could be a good first step, and a good way to introduce guidelines on a global level. But for us then, we have found that the Recyclass guidelines are really useful, and we use them, they're European, but we use them globally. So, and by that we have managed to, for example, it's technical things like ink on the products, how you place the ink and the printing on the products, and also we have, for example, 80% of recycled plastic in some packaging. So thanks to these guidelines that has helped us.
It's really interesting. You've observed that. Well, you say that the European guidelines, but used globally, and I think we've seen that elsewhere. That sometimes it can be about just cracking the door open. With our jeans redesign guidelines, we found that companies said, "Well, I've used them to redesign the jeans portfolio or some of that, but what about jackets or other garments?" So could they apply the same thinking? And I think sometimes there's a bit of a sense of the snowball rolling down the hill on circular design, and once people see that what is possible, they can move on to the next stepping stone. Stephanie, let's come to you. What could you reflect on the policy? Any policy drivers that are making it easier for Unilever to practice circular design?
Yeah, sure. Unilever, I guess, is quite widely known in terms of fast-moving consumer goods company. We have food products, we have cosmetics, we have detergents, and in terms of policy as an incentive, as a support for our circularity of our products, this is a very important tool. It has been for a long time, and it's something we've always encouraged. It's a powerful tool, but it's a complex tool. We have to be mindful that we want policy to encourage, to be the incentive, but in a space that is constantly evolving. This is also difficult to have regulation that is future fit, that can, adapt with innovation. Some of the things it's saying, like projecting the future, well, no, we cannot always predict the future or project into what's going to happen, what kind of technology is going to be there and is going to be available and scalable for everybody to use. So policy can clearly give a signal, support the transition of entire sectors, because it's not just about first movers, but it's about also going there together as a group. And this is a very important tool, but to use with caution, and I'm guessing we'll come back to that, on how much it can sometimes unintentionally close doors for innovation, but it's important that it gives a signal, that it sets the right incentives for companies to think with circularity in mind. And this is really something that we have promoted as a company.
We're in that tricky stage, and I think we'll be in it for a number of years, of designing for the circular economy whilst existing and operating in a fundamentally linear economy, and the two will coexist, hopefully in changing proportions, for many years, which highlights the need to be adaptable and for policy to adapt as well. Let's come to you, Aline. How would you assess the EU's efforts to adopt a regulatory framework that can foster circularity?
Yeah, thank you. So far, I believe the European Commission has done a tremendous job putting circular economy on the map. It started about a decade ago. But now it has moved from a zero waste to a system change agenda, really looking into systemic solutions, really looking into circular design, more transparency, making sure that products are kept in a loop. However, there is a little bit of an issue at the moment. So there's been a lot of improvements made. But as we know, the current material consumption in the EU is still far beyond what's sustainable between the limits of our planet. The European Environment Agency estimates that the current EU economy is about 11.5% circular. And we know that there has been efficiency gains, and we know that there has been a tremendous effort moving forward. However, there is a big emphasis on recycling still. And that does hinder progress towards a circular economy. However, that being said, if we look at the circular economy agenda in Europe compared to globally, I believe that the EU, because of its system lens and because of taking a systemic approach, it still leads the way, and it's still the front runner in circular economy legislation globally compared to other regions in the world. When we then look at circular economy agenda has a high level ambition, and there is so many measures on the table right now that really put the transition forward. But when we look at one of the potential issues that there might be is from ambition towards implementation. When we look at member states, there is a fragmented approach across member states. Some member states are really front runners. For example, France, we heard about the repair index earlier this morning. Or the Netherlands, because they have ambitious legislation, they have public-private collaboration, they push business models. But the issue is that there is a disparity between different countries, which makes it very difficult to navigate the EU market. And as an example, to close this off, the previous legislation, the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, which had a great ambition level, and it was really pushing the boundaries towards circular economy. However, what we saw, national-wide implementation, turned into a massive fragmented approach with different rules on reuse, different rules on recycling, on packaging, which again made it really hard to navigate the EU market from an industry perspective, but also from a legislator's perspective to really understand how to make the best transposition of this EU legislation. So overall, yes, we're on the right track. The framework is there. But now it's about harmonization, making sure the implementation is there, and making sure that we get to a higher percentage of circularity in the EU market, I would say.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I hadn't twigged that it's not as simple as one country being able to say, oh, we're leading on circular economy, because actually with an uneven progress towards implementation, that could actually hinder the efforts for individual countries and as a bloc as well. Let's come to you, Paola, who's sitting behind me as sort of floating figure. What do you think then? How would you evaluate the Commission's? What does the Commission make of the first decade of circular economy action in the EU?
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, I will have to repeat what has been said by Eileen, because she's very, very correct in indicating that we see progress. The efforts of the legislations paid back, and in fact, with all the examples that you have shown up until now, you have to agree with the push for ambitions that we put in legislations really translated into massive and important investments by companies, which was precisely what was needed. So it's the second piece of the puzzle after the legislation is the steps made by industries. At the same time, it is true that we see differences in member states, and then this is why in the next, I think the next mandate, we are at the end of 2 mandates of circular economy, but clearly we have to look further. So we need to focus on implementation. So how do we do that? It's quite a challenge because of the disparity of the awareness, because of the different performance in the member states. So I think we will continue to finalize the legislative efforts, because what actually might have been seen as a big push continues with secondary legislations in many cases. So we will continue to work on that, finalize, clarify, listen from industry what are the hurdles, because since we said it, it's already a decade of experience. We already are able to integrate the feedback in the evaluation, in the reviews of the legislative frameworks that we put forward. So it's a combination of pushing for implementation, clarifying the measures, understanding where the hurdles are, and at the same time, I would say, being very clear with the objectives. And for this, we certainly have to keep very close the idea that we need to close the material loops. This brings the tensions between recycling, it was mentioned, and at the same time still focusing on prevention of waste. So this is really one of the key nexus that we need to work on. Talking about the goals, we need to be very clear that the climate goals are ahead, and we need to fulfill them. We committed it in legislation. We also want to keep very clear the opportunities for competitiveness and enhancing competitiveness with circular economy. Maybe tapping on, since we said that circular economy allows to be resilient to economic shocks, looking at another type of resilience, and I'm thinking about the more specifically for environment, water resilience. This is one of the topics that we want to put forward. So not just as a sector, typically for circular economy we identify sectors, but in this case we need to look broader as to one of the resource. So water resilience will be certainly one of the area where we want to tap even further. And I would also add the bioeconomy. So whenever we talk about feedstocks and materials, we need to see where they are, promoting the bioeconomy, but at the same time addressing some of the challenges, notably for the biomass availability gap, for example. And at final element of this framework, and then of the lessons learned over the past decade, is really trying to make the enabling conditions, I think it was mentioned also this morning by some of the designers, even more effective. So I'm talking about governance, investments, and certainly research and innovation. But again, events like this one today are really reassuring, I would say, onto the capacity of businesses to be receptive to the innovation need and to take on the challenges. I really liked the presentation of Coca-Cola transforming it into a real challenge and a sportive challenge, because I think this is what will really rally a lot of the countries and of the companies that are still trying to find their ways on where to start with circularity. So this joint efforts is certainly what we need to continue.
Thank you for that. It sounds like almost the what's in focus for legislation is heading further upstream in a way. Talking about topics like water and other critical resources, that they're hugely cross-cutting, and we're talking about the actual resources that are used in and that we depend on, which is a really interesting area to focus, because not only is it urgent, but when we get further upstream, the issues do get more complex, really. It can be harder to understand who owns the problem, and as a result, it can be harder to tackle upstream challenges, which to me really highlights the importance of policy as a measure there to bring people around the table to sort of force ownership of challenges and align folks to work on them. I think that's given us, from everyone, we've got a good lay of the land in sort of story so far. Let's have a think about maybe start looking to the future. So I'm going to open this up to anyone on the panel, but what do you think the role of regulation is in promoting circular design? What should it do? What should regulation do? And maybe what should it avoid doing? What should it not do? Does anyone want to pick up that?
I'll start then. So I think that it's really key that regulation allows for future innovations and also allow companies to take steps. Sometimes there are huge leaps, sometimes there are minor steps. And this could also be linked to the challenges that products pose. For example, we have products that are contact sensitive, so therefore it's more difficult then to use recycled materials when it comes to packaging. So that's really allow for innovation, allow for the creativity, because I think that's really crucial to really to take on these big challenges together. We need innovation. That's and it could be also when it comes to the use of energy sources, etc. Not to limit innovation. Another thing that we didn't discuss, it's the consumer. I think really bring the consumer on this journey, because the power that the consumer has is key, and also they play an important role here. And for example, for us, it's key that all the claims that we make needs to be substantiated. And some of you here in Brussels might follow this Green Claims Directive, which is currently being discussed. And I think the ambition is really good, and lots of element, and also in the already adopted empowering the consumer for the green transition. It's really important to end greenwashing that we see. And at the same time, of course, to have, for example, a pre-approval or an ex-ante approval system of each and every single claim, it's very bureaucratic and costly, and might actually lead to innovations and products coming to the consumer a bit too late and not being accurate anymore, and also for the consumer to really have the relevant information to make these choices. That's really key. So it needs to strike this balance of really raising the bar to end greenwashing and to have only substantiated claims, and at the same time not then going to green hushing.
Sure.
So that's
this idea that companies aren't talking about the achievements that they have made for fear of unwanted scrutiny or misinterpretation from maybe the media, which is an issue, right? Customers need to know the options that are available to them, why they are different, maybe why they are better. And as you say, legislation can improve the communication between brands and customers. So that's a great point. Any other sort of do's and don'ts for policymakers?
I'm happy to just add one line and then head it over to, because I do agree setting the framework and lifting the bar, but I wanted to maybe highlight a potential barrier as we can set up a framework along the principle of a circular economy and try and move it forward, but the moment we dig into what is durability, what is reusability, it gets a step more difficult to really understand how does this apply across sectors. And I just wanted to highlight what we can call the streetlight effect, which is where there's an overexposure sometimes on material impacts that are easy to measure. For example, carbon is easy to measure, in comparison to others that are very hard to measure, like, for example, impact on nature. How do you measure biodiversity and nature regeneration? So that's something that I wanted to flag, that even when we dig into implementation, we should also keep the system lens and keep thinking about even those impacts within the system that we cannot measure yet, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't take a high importance in discussing design guidelines or developing circular economy frameworks. But yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's a great point, and I bang on about upstream stuff all the time, but it's sometimes easier to measure downstream impacts, right? Like how much plastic you fished out of the ocean or how many speeding tickets you gave out for people who already committed a crime. It's harder to quantify the things that you didn't let happen in the first place. Which is a challenge, right, for people that want to measure and feel proud of the impact they're making. Measuring something that you didn't allow to happen, again, ties into the greenwashing piece, is an area that needs a bit more exploration.
Yeah, I mean, I will echo also what has been said before in terms of setting a direction. Giving a signal for investment through legislation is extremely powerful. I can take an example that has been discussed at length in this town, probably, when it comes to packaging and recycling technologies. We have today a huge investment gap when it comes to having the capability in Europe to recycle enough materials, particularly plastic, for the targets that we have set ourselves. I think the EIB last year estimated about 7 billion investment gap, so this is huge. And legislation is there to send this signal for investment. Yes, you will have a market in Europe if you invest in that technology, if you develop this innovation. And for a sector like ours in Unilever, we have a demand for very high quality recycled material. For food packaging, this is extremely important to have the highest quality possible, and not all technologies can deliver that quality. Some advanced recycling technologies are needed to complement the technologies that already exist. And it is important that legislation really sends this signal that there is space for those technologies in Europe, and that there is a market, because it's a huge investment for for a supplier of recycled plastic to establish a plant and say, okay, it's going to cost me a lot of money. Who's going to buy it? And we need to really have a regulation that sends this message, this signal, recognizing the role that some technologies can play. And I will come back in the space of incentives and having the right economic incentives. I'll come back to something that Paula said before when talking about bioeconomy and the role of bioeconomy. We have scarcity of biomass and a lot of things that biomass can do. Today, we have already economic incentives geared towards bioenergy, biofuels, but we're now discovering there's a lot of other potentials for the use of biomass that could have higher value, to your point also about keeping the highest value of the material. So we also need to be mindful that those economic incentives need to be revisited regularly when the situation changes, to make sure that we don't get locked into a situation that the economic incentives doesn't go in the direction you actually want it to go. Sure.
So I'm going to come to you, Paula, because we're already in 5 minutes. We're hearing technological investment in technology, sending signals and economic incentives, communication with consumers. So it's clear that regulating or setting regulation that stimulates design is complex. There are many options or opportunities. And what decisions do you see lying ahead for the Commission in working on this, in setting regulation that stimulates circular design?
I think I need to pick up on some of the points that
Sure.
that were made to answer your questions, because they are very relevant. But I would like just to make some, add some nuances. In fact, I think although the situation is complex, and it is true that the more you dig into implementation, the more you find complexity, we also have quite a lot of instruments already at hand. They just need to be used and understood in the right way and then implemented in the right way. I'm thinking about just picking on one after the other, the points that were made, working with consumers. And yes, we are fostering the Green Claims Directive towards directions for having ex ante controls of claims. Why we're doing so? Basically, we already have the ex post and it's not working. So sometimes the proposals that we have might seem heavy or bureaucratic. In fact, the aim is just an answer to a situation that is not working. So what we need to work together is in making the suggestions that we have in the legislations easier to implement, but not substituting the measure per se. So again, there is no point in complicating the life of a business that wants to make a claim, because it's part of the common efforts for the transitions. But I think that the right balance should be somewhere in requiring what is necessary and what would work. So let me take the example ex ante, and at the same time finding ways to make this, to combine it with different communication channels. I'm thinking about, again, the presentations that we saw before. There's a whole range of activities, not only one, that really contributes to circularity. And this is why the strategy of a company is successful, because they are tapping on several areas, several aspects of the consumers, not only the convenience, not only the price, not only the taste. So it's a whole corporate effort. So this needs time and space to be communicated, but in the end, it is what's going to make the difference. So then the ex post the ex ante control will have to come just as an easier efforts, because all the other efforts are already known and consolidated and verified and transparent. To do so also, since all this is the result of investments and then changes, we do need to use the LCA, so life cycle assessment methodologies, because as complicated as they are a common framework to cover and to tick different boxes. So then we don't risk the effect that Eline was indicating of just communicating on the easy impact, or on the easy efforts, on the easy results, but on the impacts that actually matters. So with this instruments that we want to continue working on legislations, we should we should arrive at appropriate result. For the bioeconomy, this also brings me to stress that we need to ensure that legislations develops what we call the sustainability criteria. And this will be the focus of our work as well. I see it, because we don't want to be trapped in situations that were mentioned, where we have competition for the material with different priorities, being it by a sector or by a function. So the sustainability criteria will have to be digged in. They are complex, but some compromise will have to be made, and then this is something that will keep us busy for the next couple of years, I think, at least, especially when we talk about bioeconomy. And the very last point I wanted to make is on the investment gap. The EIB precisely, yes, identifies and then continues to work with us to identify the gaps, but also what are the best instruments, economic measures that would fulfill, and where we could channel. So we are really working towards optimizing the offer of the measures and the signals that we can give from the legislations to direct these the investments. And then, I don't want to put on the table too many conflicting items, but this is what we have on a daily basis. But measures to address the technologies for recycling, being mechanical recycling or chemical recycling, are being in preparation, as you all know. And in this area, it is clear that the signals, depending on the measures, the signals for the investments will have to be heard in a clearer way. So all these elements are known, and we are really trying to make them work for the future of the transition.
Thanks, Paola. I should just put a call out. We've got about 15 minutes left. We're very much accepting questions. I believe most of them are coming through online, but I don't know if we've got the capability for questions in the room. But we do. There's a microphone. If you do have a question, raise your hand, and I'll come to you in just a moment. I just want to switch back to the business, the industry angle for a second. We spoke. It feels a little bit like we're saying, well, what can policymakers do? What can policymakers do? What's the role of businesses? What's the role of industries in shaping, in guiding design policy or policy that supports the circular economy at implementation and design level?
I think we have a huge role to play, and I think we're, for example, as Essity, then we're collaborating with different stakeholders, both globally and on a European level, to develop different guidelines, and, for example, also to promote extended producer responsibility systems, etc., which has shown, it really works to get to improve recycling of packaging, and I think that collaboration across the value chain is really key here, because of course it can also be like when we discuss life cycle, it's also a bit like the value chain. We need to have the collaborations with both our suppliers, but also waste handlers, etc. So that's something that we could work more with, I think.
Is that happening?
It is happening, but I think it could be improved even more, because and it's a challenge, I think, for all organizations that that you're a bit working with in silos, and then you realize that this doesn't work in the whole system, so to speak. So I think that that needs to be improved.
Okay, Stephanie, what do you think?
I think I agree with you. I would say that obviously industry has a key role in shaping policy, particularly as Eline was saying, we're going to get into implementation, something much more complex. And I think the showcases from today have shown that there's no one size fits all. Each sector is quite different. Within our company even, you can't address sustainability of a detergent the way you address the sustainability of a mayonnaise. It is completely different, and we need to bring our knowledge, our expertise to policymakers. We can't realistically expect the Commission to be an expert in everything. And we all know that in sustainability, you do have trade-offs. But those trade-offs are not the same depending on the sector you're looking at or the product you're looking at. So we have really a key role to play, an active role to play in sharing this expertise, this knowledge, also that we have acquired with networks and partners like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but also suppliers. Like you said, we have a supplier engagement program in Unilever focused on climate, where we really try to bring our suppliers along and all the way down to consumers, as we said. So we stand very much ready to contribute to the next phase, which is going to be very much about implementation. And we encourage everybody to also share their experience and their knowledge.
I'm going to be very conscious of the different way I use detergent and mayonnaise now. Just really keeping an eye on that. But it's a good point. People often ask us, what are the circular design strategies or the principles of circular design? And my sort of probably quite annoying response is that you can't repair a sandwich. There are obviously, it's hugely context specific, and the solution that's required for a sandwich or a pair of jeans or a car are going to vary massively, not just depending on the product, but the geography and the way the customers use it and the price of the thing. So that, unfortunately, surprise, surprise, designers and businesses kind of need to do the work to figure out the solution that works in practice rather than a cookie cutter approach across different product sectors. Aline, you've touched upon a few points already, but what would be your recommendations then to the upcoming new commission around circular economy? Are there things that haven't yet been addressed in the circular economy action plans?
Yeah, so it's no surprise if I'm going to say that we need to focus on implementation. I think that's a bit the threat today. But I do believe the current legal framework is there. It's about implementing and harmonizing, but not only harmonizing across member states, but harmonizing across the whole legal framework, making bridges between climate and biodiversity as well, and making sure that we keep the system lens when looking towards implementation, and inviting as many stakeholders to the table to really understand what things mean in practice, and that we stay close to the economic reality so that implementation actually happens and doesn't stay like a paper park. But one of the biggest things that I believe needs to be addressed is that we are currently in an economy that's still hardwired for the linear economy. And without making the economics work, I'm afraid we're never going to get towards the circular economy. We need to really start getting serious about shifting tax systems, looking into fiscal reform, subsidies, grants. I mean, I heard about the investment gap, but there is also a big public spending and a lot of money that comes from tax that could be used and utilized in a totally different way. So yeah, I think I just wanted to end with, without making the economics work, the European Green Deal might never get implemented, the circular economy might not get there, and I think it's really time that we look into that in more depth. Yeah.
Any reflections on that, Paola? Do you think the circular economy will continue to be a priority for the Commission? And can you comment on whether you think you could foresee a change in approach or expansion to different sectors? You touched upon some of that at the start, but any other reflections?
So I think so. I think we send already messages and clear messages that the circular economy will remain at the core of the activity also in the next mandate. Under which framework is another story, but then this is how, it's the recipe that somehow the new mandate will cook up. But for sure, as a principle, it has, and I would also actually add that it is because also of front runners companies, and it is because of the level of the transitions that, although we still need to go a long way, we've come to a point where we cannot come back because of the investments precisely, and then the directions and all these big efforts that have already been made. So this is very reassuring. I think what might change is again the type of framework that we put. So we are focusing on the measures that we have put. We are focusing on bringing everyone behind the circular economy, so trying to enlarge the basis of circularity, because precisely the system is still linear. So maybe touching on those areas where the linearity is greater, or somehow it has not been influenced enough by circular principles, but with an angle to implementation. So that would be at least my hope. So it is certainly something that we are discussing. We do need to, as I said at the very beginning, we are lucky enough to have enough years where we can already have lessons of what we've done that maybe works or does not work. So working with the value chain is certainly a process that works. Tapping on public administrations, not just for the implementation, but precisely the taxes and the other economic measures that are in the hands of the member states. So developing a partnership with member states, or between the European and the national level, for the implementation, for specific measures that can be taken. And then I think you mentioned at the very beginning these tensions that we have with some countries going as front runners. but it would be ideal if we would find a governance model that allows these to continue being, the pull force, and at the same time not disrupt or not generate fears in the ones that always feel that need to catch up. So there's a need to work, I think, between administrations and governments that is a little higher than maybe in the past.
Thanks, Paola. When you describe some of the sort of momentum there, I'm always reminded of there was a quote at the start of the first report that we published on the circular economy back in 2012. And on the inside cover it said, "Nothing is impossible, especially if it's inevitable." And I still believe that there's a certain inevitability around the circular economy. We will have to, at some point, we'll be forced to be much smarter with the way that we use resources and energy. But the way that unfolds is very much in our hands collectively. And we have control now and in the coming decades of how that is implemented. And many of the keys to a fruitful and prosperous implementation of a circular economy, I think, have been touched on today. I am going to open us up in these remaining sort of 5 or so minutes for any questions. So, any from the room? Yes. So over here, there's a microphone heading your way.
Thank you. My name is David Higgins. I work for a company called International Paper. Thank you for the event today. The speakers have been fabulous. Not sure if it's a question, but maybe a statement for which maybe all panelists could have a point of view
I'll turn it into a question, I think.
Please. But it's this harmonisation. How do we get this notion of, if we look back on the Commission's mandate, and what would we evaluate the scorecard in terms of where the legislation has gone and the collaboration with industry? The collaboration theme has been paramount in the discussion. I think the scorecard would say, in terms of ambition, the regulator probably gets an A+. In terms of collaboration, it probably fails on an E-. And the contrarian point of view, as opposed to thinking that this is all working perfectly, if I take maybe 3 pieces of legislation, one from the previous mandate, the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which has already been called out for being something that didn't get implemented properly. But it created a lot of confusion in the marketplace because of poor definitions in the legislation, which could have been better sorted with collaboration with industry at the beginning. The packaging and packaging waste regulation, for which our company were in the corrugated packaging space as well. The original version of that directive update, which became a regulation, it didn't recognize the benefit of cardboard corrugated for recycling. It was a piece of policy, a proposal that was written by the Commission together with an outside consulting agency, more from the NGO space, environmental space, without really collaborating with industry. The market impact assessment studies were not done properly. If I look at the EU deforestation regulation, currently in discussion for how to best comply come January of next year, 7 commodities are impacted by the deforestation regulation, which is all part of this policy space. None of the 7 commodity categories think that compliance by January is possible. All are asking for an extension in time. Europe's trade partners are asking for an extension in time. 20 member states in a recent council meeting are asking for time, but the Commission is digging its heels in and won't consider an extension in time. And so putting the 3 pieces, 3 concrete examples of legislation in the statement that says, if we get better collaboration from the beginning, maybe a little less legislation, but better legislation. And to the colleague from Unilever who talks about, I think that the concept was being able to invest with confidence. Mm. Everybody in the room and everybody online wants to be able to deliver on the circular economy and invest with confidence, because it's industry that provides the jobs, the employments, paying taxes, adding value to the economy. If we're going to actually get to a circular economy, then we need to be able to do it better from the beginning. Better designed legislation, as opposed to then the unintended consequences and trying to have fixes as we go along, or non-transparent delegated acts. And so the statement is, how can we get better collaboration and reflection of what's been happening over the last mandate or 2?
Wonderful. So better collaboration. Anyone?
Yeah,
reaching
I
for
would
the
say that it also it comes back to us. We need to be better equipped to share our expertise with, I mean, not only the Commission but all policymakers. Of course, we need to be invited, so we need to have a seat at a table. But we also need to really, I mean, we've all been working with today's topic, then circular economy, for decades, and we need to share our experience and our learnings, and be more maybe transparent also with policymaker, what's working, what's not working, and yeah, to help in this legislative process. And I think also there has been a huge speed in many of the legislative files. There is a point of having more time to prepare legislative files, having time for different stakeholders to engage. So that's something I think I would ask for in the coming Commission also.
It would feel wrong not to get the perspective from the Commission. So, Paola, any view on that tension?
Yes, no. I know, because I hear all these comments. They've been made several times. I can only say that maybe it's an easy way out for me, but it's always easier to comment on what should have been done better afterwards. What I want to stress is that at a certain point, ambition comes with timely measures. Just see, and sorry to bring always the same example of Coca-Cola. Ideally, you would need 3 to 4 months. Well, now they have only 4 weeks, and they're going to try to make it in 4 weeks. So this idea of ideal world where you have 2 years to prepare everything, and then in fact at the same time you need it now because the messages for the investors are needed now, does create a tension. So I'm not saying that it's good to rush legislation, because this is really not what I want the message to come across. I think we have set up measures for better regulations. We have impact assessment. We have dozens and tons of consultations, maybe too many, because what we heard in the past years is that also the stakeholders, so all the people that are asking to be around the table, were asked too many times to be around the table. So maybe there is a rationalization in that sense, because I realized that it was difficult for us, and it's difficult for companies to be everywhere and to make their voice heard everywhere. So in that sense, maybe I would agree on the quantity, so then we can focus on less piece of legislations, but I would still maintain that it is important to be timely and to come and to put the accelerator on, not to the expenses of quality of legislations, but to be ready to respond to the request for level playing field, competitiveness, responding to what other area of the globes are doing in terms of legislations, and then giving advantages to their own stakeholders, their own businesses. So, as you can imagine, and I'm sure people are in the room also know, there are a lot of elements to take into consideration. But again, I would just continue, if it was to be redone, to plea for the ambition, for the timely, and then maybe just for the future, focus on less, on few pieces of legislation. That would be my ideal world.
I'm just going to sneak in a question for our previous speakers from the showcase, because we did have a lot of questions in earlier in the day. We've been cursed, it was ever thus, with lots of wonderful comments from the panel and the speakers throughout the course of the session. So forgive those who did ask a question who haven't had it addressed. But one question we had back in the showcase portion was, and I don't mind who answers this, they're in the front row. How do you ensure that circular design thinking is incorporated into your organization beyond the design communities? How do you bust down the silos and ensure that there is a widespread understanding of circular design, which is crucial for implementation? Anyone? Harold, hand shot up.
Can I still speak? Okay. Yeah. Naya hinted a bit at that, right? But you need to build. Yeah, you need to start with finding the requirements and the guidelines, etc., and then you need to pilot, and then you need to build it into your processes. So Philips, as I'm sure many companies have very process-oriented innovation processes, so it's actually quite easy to see where it needs to be implemented. But then, as I said, the added complexity is here is that there's no such a thing as a circular product. So you need to bring then different stakeholders together at other moments in the innovation pipeline that we were used to before. So that's one of the things. The other thing is you need to always put circular design in the context of the broader circular transition. Right, so we have built communities in our company. We have monthly community calls where we talk about all the different elements of circular economy. Always start again with, okay, this is our ambition on circular economy. It's around, then the implementation is around design, manufacturing, new business models, and take back, and extending the lifetime of your products, and then always talking about what is the different contributions of everyone towards these higher goals.
And if I may add to what Harold is saying, it's also, circular economy is not the business only for the technical team or the R&D team, right? It needs to be addressed, and I will use some corporate language now, in a cross-functional way. It's also commercialization, it's technical, it's R&D, it's public affairs, it's finance. Everyone needs to be participating in that to make it a reality. And all these have aspects for design as well. So that's one. It's everyone's business. And the other point is partnerships. So you're not only doing this alone, on your own, in one company. Partnerships are very important to innovate, to bring new ideas, extend the barriers, think how we can do things better, different, test. And we should not underestimate that, because we talk about what we do inside, but it's important how we partner with other organizations, be it other companies, be it companies that are doing different things from us, or with civil society as well, and in the end also making it work in real life in the market, as Harold said, with the consumers.
Yeah, great points. And sometimes people say, what's the circular economy transition like? Well, it's probably unlike anything we've seen before, but it might be a bit like the digital revolution, in that a few decades ago, there were a few very technical people who knew about what that could mean for a business, and now there's a certain level of widespread literacy that's required for a business to stay sort of current and adaptive and ready for the changes that might be on the horizon. I think we probably need to wrap up. Certainly from my role, I'm going to hand over to Greg in just a moment. But I'd love to thank all of the panelists that have joined today, the speakers on the showcase, and those who have joined in the room and online, and obviously to DS Smith for hosting us for this conversation about design for the circular economy. And to close us out, I'd like to hand over to Greg Dawson to offer some final words. Thank you.
And thank you, Joe, for being a wonderful leader of today's conversation, and for Ellen MacArthur for being such an inspiring thought leader with us. And thank you. Thank you to Philips for being a great partner. And thank you to everyone here, all of our wonderful speakers, and Paola, who's just left us, for leading such an interesting conversation. DS Smith instinctively has been working around sustainability for decades, but actually only just lent into the circular economy in the last 6 years. And we all know what a challenge that is, to continue to push and inspire both inside the organisation and outside. And it's very encouraging to see such a wonderful group of leaders also doing the same. So thank you very much, everyone here in Brussels. Please stay for coffee. Please carry on the conversation with us. And again, next week in the Circular Economy Forum. Thank you to those online. We do have a recording of this production today, so please share and spread the message. But thank you, everyone, very much, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.